Okay, so we should be live. I'm gonna just make sure that it gets live. My cat is really needy. This is Tuck. She says hi and pet me. Yeah. So let me know how the audio is. Okay, so I just checked it. Looks like it's good. Yeah, that's just the Zoom thing that's showing up there. Okay, so looks like we're ready to get started. Wow. So, to look over the past couple months, December really had a lot of heavy energy, and in particular, lots of people were sick, dealing with ascension symptoms. Although sometimes it just looks like you're sick, lots of people don't necessarily interpret that as an ascension symptom, and that's fine. But it was evident, that things are changing. And then January felt heavy because, as we raise in consciousness, we start to look at the world that we're experiencing, and it feels heavier in comparison because, we are changing and we're also purging stuff. Even throughout our everyday, there's stuff that we're purging. And hopefully for you, like it is for me, this stuff is getting easier and easier to process. I think I'm finally starting to feel a bit better, feeling a bit more energy. And there's supposed to be another solar flash coming up in February, according to some people. So some of that heaviness, that fatigue may come back through that, but it's part of this rapid shift, this rapid change. I hear different stories or ideas about, when the solar flash happened or when it's happening. So, and I think the reason why is because there's different timelines that people are experiencing, they're connected to. And we're already all in this kind of soup. And we're all experiencing these different aspects, right? Very light aspects, dark aspects, we're all experiencing it together, but we're slowly separating apart. So we're not going to be experiencing a lot of those heavy things much longer as we separate out from that. So that's what's described in the separation of the 3D to the 5D Earth, so the split. But you've really got these different timelines, these parallel realities that are coexisting and sometimes overlap at times. It seems to me like people are experiencing different things and kind of coming into contact with each other, and maybe they're saying no, you're wrong, that's not real, this is what actually is happening, but people have different experiences. And so it's very strange to be able to interact in that way. But you do ultimately have choice about where you want to be, where you want to end up. So if there's stuff that's stressing you out right now, it's just your job to move through that and work through that. And also hold on to hope and think about where do you want to be and what do you want to experience. So if people are saying things that you don't want to experience that, and things start to show up as indicators in your life of that, don't freak out. Consider those things as they could be indicators of maybe what is happening on a lower timeline, maybe what is passing through and you're moving through. So there's different explanations of things, but most of all, you don't want to freak out. You want to have faith that things are working out in a really beautiful way for you. Okay, so the title of this live is called Restoring Human Divinity. So last week we talked about waking up. And I wanted to talk about different descriptions of that and to reconcile different ideas of what that meant. So we talked about ideas of enlightenment. There can be different degrees or states of enlightenment where you experience enhanced states of love and bliss, or even just pure nothingness. You can experience reality as holographic. It involves detaching from the mind and ego, a spiritual awakening, an awareness of yourself as more than just the body, an awareness of reality being different than what is collectively socially agreed upon. Deconstructing social conditioning can happen as part of that process and can also be what is referred to as waking up. And also, waking up can refer to seeing political and economic manipulation, kind of having it unveiled before you within your psyche, and realizing this is not what I thought it was, this is not what I was told that it was, and there are groups of people who have gotten together and decided on what it really is, or what is really going on there. So there's different stories around that. So I've got some discussion regarding what we discussed last week. I was talking with a coworker. When we want to talk about this topic, there are different perspectives that we can use. So last week I referenced some different videos that were talking about different levels or degrees of waking up. So we can have the enlightenment part of waking up, which is described in the Zen Buddhist stream of thought, where it's really diving down into the core of who are we, like what is reality made of. And it's not dealing with any of the stories or explanations about what we're experiencing. It's just really about experiencing reality directly, which provides us some important insights. You can get into a loop of continually wondering and thinking questions about who am I? Do I really exist? What is this I? And you can follow that stream if you want to. You can also just really be present and live in a heart-centered way. So that's really valuable as well. You have different ideas about what it means to wake up or what it means to be enlightened, but in the end, you choose what works for you. So when we talked about enlightenment last week, we were talking about an awareness of the reality of experience being felt rather than boiled down to mental constructs. So ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and language all point to or describe the reality we experience. They are not the reality itself. So truth or reality can only be felt, experienced directly. So everything else is these kind of mental models or constructs of reality. And it doesn't matter how accurate those models of reality are, they are still not experiencing reality directly. Because when you experience reality directly, there is this really huge information in terms of the senses that is available to you, that you're experiencing. And the more you're in the moment, the more you're experiencing what is happening to you. So you can have mental ideas about what is true, which is not what you're experiencing in the moment. So yes, those models that you have of reality, yes, those can be true in a sense, but in that moment, what is true at the deepest sense is what you're experiencing. That's the one thing that you know for sure is true. And we'll discuss more on this in the next slides. So what differs is in how we interpret that reality. So you can have two people experience the same thing and be very affected by it in a very different way if their interpretations of that are very different. So the more you try to understand reality with the mind, the more you end up in a mental loop. It matters less that you think or perceive that you are enlightened than to just perceive and experience reality directly. So this is the thing, it's like you can be obsessed about, I want to become enlightened, but the more you're obsessed about it, the less, like the further away you are from it. It's really about being in the moment. So if you end up arguing about different beliefs or ideas, you're really dealing with differences in meaning. And if you really boil it down and find a way to extract what you mean and someone else means through a set of words, you might find that you're arguing over nothing. So this is where, when we have conflict with people or are arguing with people, we have to be careful. Like, what are we arguing about? Is it really important? And does this conversation bring us closer to where we want to be? When you have differences of opinion, what is the real meaning behind what words you are using? And how do you know that you believe something different than what someone else believes? And does the difference boil down to a difference in what certain words mean to you compared to what they mean to someone else? And we don't realize often how our experience shapes the meaning of certain words. So do words have a strictly universal meaning? No, they don't, because someone who has a certain experience is tied to a word. They're going to have a very different perception and meaning of that word. We don't see that in English as much, but for example, in Mandarin, each character has a layered depth of meaning. So, and that makes the language quite complex, but maybe more accurate, because, well, it can be harder to decipher and understand, especially if they're learning the language, what things mean, and meanings can be obscured and changed over time. But that reflects there's a depth to what the words mean and the context in which they are used. Because we have this mental map that has all these associations within our mind, where, you know, the word family can be tied to love and comfort and warmth and security for one person, and then tied to chaos and stress and hurt for another person. So there are really these different layers to words. And this is difficult to articulate and explain, and is often easier felt. So sometimes we rely on our feelings or our sensations. Feelings can also be sensations within the body, because if you feel something, you can articulate, like, where do you feel it in the body? Like, you can feel like a tight chest, like a constricted chest, or like a tightness like in the center of your chest, so like where your heart is. or you can feel kind of nauseous in your belly, that can be related to anxiety. So there is this wisdom that we can have that we can't always articulate in words. So coming back to this idea of what is real. So thoughts exist, but what makes certain thoughts and beliefs more valid than other thoughts, like the thought that you exist? So this is what we covered in last week. So, and the other question is, what creates a sense of what is true and what is not true? It can be like an emotion or a sense within you, which we just described, or it can also be directly tied to what your soul wants to experience. So if you are connected to the idea that you are a soul in a body experiencing, then you can have a certain timeline, you can have a certain reality or parallel reality that you are experiencing where you wanted to experience certain things. So, and like I discussed earlier, if you've got a multi-dimensional universe, parallel realities, you've got different timelines, then, and you're these timelines are intertwined, so people are interacting with each other, and they are experiencing different realities. They are actually experiencing different realities, depending on what their soul chooses to experience, both before the soul enters the body and also while in the body. So there's this idea of choice. Last week we talked about there not being free will or choice being an illusion, and this is where it gets tricky, right? So I can't integrate that right now. But if we assume there's a choice, and even if it's just an illusion of choice, then there can be a choice point where you decide, you know what, I don't want to learn these lessons anymore. I don't want to learn more about what this kind of experience feels like. Then I want to experience something different. So then you can experience something different and choose a different timeline. So this is kind of like exiting a matrix, or exiting one level of the matrix. So we can see, if you're really attached to your ideas of what's true, that's going to be difficult for you, like interacting with other people who are experiencing different realities and who are maybe attached to a certain set of language, or what that language means. Okay, so this is coming back to the stories about, what reality is and what's happening. So, and that's why I say, take what's useful for you. Do you need an elaborate justification of why you should experience a better life? I say, no, you don't. I say you can just choose to experience a better life. You don't need to worry too much about the whys. So we've got these different theories on why the world is the way it is. And people become very attached to these stories. Right, whether they're true or whether they're not true. And as I was thinking about it this week, we have specific language within these stories that's used to describe what has already been agreed upon as a consensus in the spiritual community. Dark forces influencing, control over people and stealing their energy. And we have the divine spark within us of God's source, and we have the power to overcome. We have the power to really embrace the fullness of who we are. So depending on what you believe, like some people say that the things that Jesus did, if they believe that they actually happened, the miracles, the healing, that we don't have access to that, we can't do that. But if you want to embrace that and say, you know what, actually that is possible. And Jesus was just showing us that that is possible for us. So today we're talking about rediscovering like the divinity within us. I'm saying, yes, all of that's possible, and even more is possible. So I'm going to, in this live, I'm kind of building up to the points that I want to make, covering the different bases. So hopefully it'll tie in more by the end. So just a little bit more on this. A common set of language can be used to allow people to feel like they're part of a group. And then you end up with extra judgment against people who are not part of that group. And the term becoming awakened can be co-opted for a certain meaning to emphasize this sense of unity. But it might not reflect a deep understanding of other uses of the word. So it can dilute the meaning, it can create this extra judgment and division, and you might even have more in common with people who share a similar level of integrity rather than people who share those specific similar beliefs. It's a good reason to hold off on that judgment and then find ways where you can agree on things and have that find unity. Okay, so talking about stories that are describing, what has been agreed spiritually about these dark forces and our power to overcome them. Why might these stories be helpful? So they can give a cohesive narrative to people whose experiences are out of the ordinary. People with psychic gifts who have different experiences. And, they want to have validation. They don't want to be gaslit, people telling them that they're crazy. And this happens on many subtle levels and also bigger levels as a whole. And this is kind of part of a culture that will give out prescription medication, saying you have a problem, this will reduce your symptoms, but we're not going to look at really what's going on here, are different ways to deal with it. So this is a common problem that's been very widespread and is quite damaging. Yeah, medicine can definitely be helpful, but it needs to be applied in a way that's not a band-aid. So these stories can also provide a way for us to understand our power. If our power has been suppressed until now, what are we truly capable of? So this is what I'm talking about here in this live is, there's the dark and the light aspect. So the dark provides a way to emphasize the light. And through that contrast, we begin to understand these opposites of each other better. Okay, so these stories can give us ideas about what we want to create. Paradise lifestyle, harmonious cooperation, technological innovation, incredible gifts and skills, telekinesis, building through frequency, telepathy, frequency healing, and immense intellectual capabilities, just to list a few. So I briefly mentioned some of this in the New Year's Live, and so I don't want to get dragged down in the stories, and I don't want other people to get dragged down in the stories too. If it feels good to you, you can listen to them, and if you find them helpful, that's great. But at the end of the day, all of us are moving through this rapid change, and there's aspects of it that we can see, there's aspects that we can't see, and we are all experiencing this together, and interpreting it in different ways. Can you ever create a full, consistent narrative? Because, for example, news and media outlets can put forward a certain narrative. Are people going to believe it or not? It's going to vary. So you're always going to get variation and different ideas about what's really true. So I think the stories themselves, they can be helpful to a certain degree, and unhelpful in other ways. Okay, so now we've led up to this point, so I'm going to get into some of these ideas about, what's brought us to this point and what's coming forward to us. I find this interesting because it provides a narrative about what's happened and a reasons why we could become and also live lives that are really, really extraordinary. So this is the part that I find really interesting, because it's really about what's happening now into the future, and I'm not concerned as much about what's happened in the past. Maybe it's helpful to a certain degree, but what's really amazing is the beautiful things that we can create within our lives. Okay, so I'm going to get into, the stories, and this is the video link that I didn't get to last live stream. I'll post the link in the video for today, after the live. And then I'm just going to go over some of the video, and then I'm going to do a summary, and then I have also something else to share at the end. So we shouldn't be too long today. Okay, so this is called Hidden History of the Earth, discussing Atlantis, Anunnaki, Lemuria, Tartaria, and Humanity by Honey C. Golden. So she has lots of videos talking about all of this, and this is information that she's had visions of. She's talked to her higher self. It's information that she's essentially channeled from her higher self. And I thought it's very interesting. I really enjoy listening to her. And yeah, it feels in alignment with me when I listen. So it feels good. Again, I don't want to be too attached to the ideas themselves. This is cool, this is interesting for me. If it's not interesting or cool or helpful for you, I don't think you need to get too attached about worrying about it. For example, I was listening to The Real Ishmael Perez, and he was talking about very similar stuff, but then he also mentioned Yahweh, and used Yahweh as a term in reference to God source, which I understood implicitly by the context. And last week we went over, what Yahweh might not actually refer to God source, but we've understood it to through a period, and I felt this attachment to no, that's wrong, but then I realized, no, I can understand what he's saying, and I don't need to let that bother me. I don't need to let the language get in the way of listening and understanding what they're saying, the actual meaning. Okay, so she went through a death of ego, and that opened her up to psychic information. She said she got all this, I guess this vision, or maybe it was astral traveling, I'm not exactly sure. And this is what she saw. And so she's been working since then to get more information about this by establishing that connection to her higher self, which is very much like talking to your guides. So Earth is different than what we've been told, so it's not round, not flat, it's like a donut, so like a toroidal field. It's bigger than what we know. It's a being, so it's got a crystal, which is the being, and then everything's around that, and we're on the top part of it. So if you want to see the full thing, you can see the link in the description. I'm not going to go into too much depth. I'm just going to try and focus and highlight on the parts that are interesting. And so from this vision she got that we are in a corral, the ice wall within a dome, on a section of the top part of the donut. On the outer edge of the corral, the negative entities that control humanity enjoy a life in luxury. And it looks like a paradise, but there's this very negative, unpleasant energy to it. And they come in and out through tunnels. So she says that this has already all been cleaned up. So all these negative entities have all been dealt with, and the control is a shifting hands. The beings outside the dome have already ascended, so we're in the process of ascending. And then she goes through the history, talks about titans, and these stones of like faces of people that we still see. She refers to those as titans. And there's Atlantis and Lemuria, but Atlantis became very corrupt. It's this Babylon kind of energy, or that's what it feels like to her. And they wanted the power that Lemuria held. So the Lemurian and Atlantean civilization were destroyed, and we have the Anunnaki that came on a spaceship like the Death Star. I don't know about the timeline, if the Anunnaki came after that point, if this is linear, I'm not sure exactly. You've got the Nephilim, Elohim, and Sumeria, who were slaves of the Anunnaki. So that's interesting because we talked about the Elohim last week. They sure didn't sound like slaves. But of course, you know, you've got all these stories, and so it's hard to connect the dots between the stories between different people, because the terms could mean different things. Nephilim are the half human, half godlike people that are described in the Old Testament. And you've got the Anunnaki, genetically modifying people, I guess, to make better slaves. Egypt, Rome, and Tartaria are later civilizations spun off the Anunnaki, and Tartaria existed inside and outside of the dome. So she talks about these really beautiful, elaborate structures, which she says came from Tartaria. Outside the dome was peaceful, people didn't have to work to eat, and the Greys and Archons held control through the government. So I didn't go through the whole video, and if you want to watch all of it and try to piece together all of the different information, you can. So, the important points that I saw. So there's different timelines and parallel realities. So, putting this into context, if you have people who are saying, you know, there's this really scary stuff happening, like for example, when I first heard about the solar flash, I heard people say that when it happened, that there was going to be like another ice age. Well, that didn't happen. And I'm not sure what that would serve to do. But, you know, with ascension, like the more light you bring in, the more it's going to expose the dark. Light's going to shine into the dark. And so for everything that hasn't healed, and everything that isn't healed within us is reflected outwards. So we see within our life those reflections of everything within us that hasn't healed. So when we've got the different timelines then, and these parallel realities, then people who haven't done that work, who don't want to face that stuff within themselves. You don't want to do that healing within themselves because it's painful. They're going to be dealing with that inner chaos. They're going to be dealing with that external chaos. It's not going to look as nice if you just go ahead and ascend right out of that. To ascend, you do need to drop everything that's heavy, all the dense part of you. So that's everything that needs to be healed and purged. I had an experience of this really beautiful, intense love, and within that state, there was no consciousness or awareness of pain, of hurt. And it was like there was this level of separation between being able to experience that pain and hurt and then experiencing just that state of love. So if you're in that state of love, it's really difficult to understand what that other side is like. So we've been experiencing what that other side is like, and we're moving out of that. We're moving into that state of love. So it's like you can remember it, but the emotional memory or the memory of it within the body is not there anymore. So that's where we're going, but you know, you can't continue to be stuck in all of that pain, that hurt, and also experience that beautiful love. Because they're like two different sides of the fence. I like the story where, you know, all the negative stuff, it's been done with, it's gone, and what we're seeing here is the kind of after effects of it. That anything that shows up doesn't have to necessarily be things to worry about. So I like this perspective. Not having to be anxious or worried and just being focused on, you know, yeah, incredible, amazing things could happen. So more disclosure will emerge, disclosure being information being communicated. Like if you believe that, you know, reality isn't what it seems, and then information about what reality really is communicated through movies and TV shows and different means, fantasy books, then there could be more awareness coming to the surface, and maybe not hidden, but just like outright, like this is what's happening. And so this helps to ground that awareness of what's happening, because like we depend on our stories about what's real, really depend on them to orient ourselves, to ground the psyche, to kind of function and exist. So the psyche kind of unravels once you unravel the stories. So why is what's happening? And, you know, if a psyche is too tied to things being a certain way, it can be too hard on it to accept that. And it can have implications on a person's like physical body and health. So what I think is the really coolest, most interesting thing here is that it's talking about opportunities to elevate ourselves to a higher timeline by doing your own work. So processing emotional wounds, embracing your sovereignty, focusing on generating light and love. And I'm having to remember that, you know, everyone is responsible for their own selves and has to take accountability. And I can't take accountability for other people. This has been hard this week for me. That, you know, people have problems and they're struggling, but they have to learn how to like become their own dragon. It's not just slaying the dragons, like becoming their own dragon and discovering their own power. What I take away from this, which is the most important thing to me, is that the future looks bright. And this is like the continuing a summary from the video we're talking about in the slides, that we're going to see systems emerging that align with helping us grow and develop. So new technology that is environmentally friendly, that, like what I talked about before, like maybe flying cars, architecture that is less expensive and more functional. Financial abundance, where there's more than enough to go around. We're not struggling and scrimping and having to save and scrape to get by. Like there's enough for everyone, and it's not this crazy amount of stress like that. It's just ramped out to such a crazy level, right, where we can all thrive. Like there's space for everyone to be themselves fully and not feel alienated. Like there's a place for everyone. So there's this level of inclusiveness, developing close connections, being able to develop connections with people you really resonate with. So part of that is the money to be able to live where you want to live, and also being able to like travel where you want to go. Many opportunities for developing your talents, your abilities, your skills, and your interests, like what you're really interested in, and then just trying to do something for money. What I think is important here is imagining what's possible. So it's really helpful to do exercises where you think about your deservingness, like what you love about yourself, what you're thankful for, opening up your heart and your creative faculties. So we do exercises on the Absolutely Everything Pass called It's Totally Possible. We say it's totally possible that this and this happens. And like I remember when this happened, we imagined something that we really liked happening. Like we imagined that we are in like a couple years ahead in the future and we're looking back. So it's almost like we transplant ourselves into the future but are looking back and seeing what happened. And it's really fun and exciting. And also, we also do like I'm allowed to feel, or I'm allowed to whatever, to just give space to whatever is coming up too. And because of this, I was really inspired to make this journal, which I called my Quantum Leap Year Journal, which I wanted to share. And I wanted to share this on the New Year's one, but I couldn't find it. I just found this journal this week, so I was excited. This year is a leap year. So that's why I called it the Quantum Leap Years for this year. So, I don't know. This is going to be a little bit tricky. It's not really going to show it very well, but so I did the fancy lettering and then different scrapbooking like stickers that really gave the vibe of what I wanted to, what I was feeling. So I've got snow and piano. I like to play piano, and kind of like this winter scenes with like snow and trees and lights in them, like this really beautiful vibe. I got a candle and just like these roses growing up a rock wall. Yeah, just some beautiful, beautiful scenes. I've got like one of a big mansion. Yeah, so what I was going for here is I really, I wanted a beautiful house, and like the image that I'm using in the background, that's like the house that I'm manifesting. And I really enjoy skiing and playing piano, and I really enjoy those beautiful moments where you're in nature and it's really beautiful and calm and serene. So the first journal entry was March 23rd. So it was March 23rd, 2023 when I wrote this, but I put 2024 in the journal entry. And I wrote it as if I was a year in the future. So I'm gonna just share some of what I wrote because I thought it was really sweet. It's so important to take out time to imagine what it feels like to have beautiful things happen in your life. Putting yourself in that state of mind. Because, like, here's the thing with manifesting, like, it doesn't really make sense. It happens, right? But these moments where you consider beautiful things that could happen in your life that you want to happen, those are doorways for it to come through. So make as many doorways to that as you can. Hi, Paul. Happy birthday. Oh, your birthday's March 21st. Actually, your birthday's super close to my birthday. Sorry, I thought you were saying it's still January. Okay, we got a little ways, but it's coming up fast. Awesome. Okay. I remember when I stopped using social media and distractions to distract myself from the pain I felt being out of alignment with my desires. Of constantly imagining and making up reasons why I couldn't have what I truly desired. Yeah. I think it's better to have stories about why you can have what you desire rather than constantly thinking about why you can't have what you desire. Of imagining unwanted scenarios as if it could help protect me from something I was creating. I felt the stranglehold of limiting beliefs, the desire to stay small and fit in, while simultaneously being irritated. Every time that something happened that revealed the depths of these limitations. Yeah, I was headed to a different reality and no longer felt a desire to fit in. Yeah, so I was speaking from a place of like not fitting in with my peers at work. So I wrote, I felt the deep pain of feeling separated from my peers, but also separated from my desires. Because what I was desiring, what I was imagining, it wasn't fitting in to the reality that I was like seeing with my job. And that's changed. I'm seeing how they can coexist. I leaned into the pain I felt. I embraced it and it embraced me back, dissolving my fears and limitations. I walked through the gate of unknowing, of unbecoming, of dissolving the past self. I refabricated myself anew, painstakingly, thread by thread. My carefully chosen words spun a new tale. I died to the old self and was born again. I stayed true to the compass of my heart, nurturing the deepest, wildest passion, not being able to envy the mundane, boring lives of everyone else, not even for a second. They accepted what they assumed was the best that life had to offer, without knowing that there was miles more to be experienced and had. Yeah, so I was talking about like how it feels scary to embrace the unknown and the what could possibly happen, and to believe and think about what's higher. Though I walked the treacherous plank of doubt and uncertainty for many more miles, I did not drown. I conquered the sea of possibility and became a master of it. Oh, that's so sweet. I took my divine destiny, the sacred yearning of my heart, very seriously. I heard the mocking voice echoing in my mind and ignored it. The naysayer was irrelevant. I had developed power beyond compare. I didn't need anyone to hold my hand. I was so adept at surfing the wave of life that I left anyone that I would have depended on and given my power over to in the dust. I never chased anyone's approval or attention anymore. I was laser beam focused on chasing the tendrils of desire taunting me, inviting me to dive into the mystery, to dive into my limitless potential. I got the beautiful house, the passionate romance, the man utterly devoted and committed to me, and my heart still longs for more. I reminisce on the beautiful times we shared, the deep love and connection present between us that I enjoyed every minute of. These memories are deeply satisfying. And I don't regret any one of them being gone past because I know I can make a million more. I wasn't attached to my marriage or my husband. I trusted him completely, and I didn't need any evidence of the security of our relationship. It's so beautiful how you can have such deep and beautiful insight into that sea of possibility. And since then, I've been struggling with so much doubt, right? You can have this like enthusiasm and optimism, right, at the beginning of a journey, and then when you're in the midst of it, it feels heavy, right? You don't have that optimism anymore. But by doing this kind of thing, like, you're really bringing out the best in yourself. You know, I felt this so strongly that it was scary to hope for and believe in more that's possible. But you absolutely should, right? Because it becomes more natural. And that fear lessens. And you have this expectation of like, oh, what if it doesn't work out, right? And then you feel bad about like, oh my gosh, it doesn't work out. But that's really tied to this expectation and achievement kind of mindset, which we're leaving behind. Where it becomes more about exploration. Because, you know, if you're an achievement mindset, achievement is based on survival, which is based on, if I get this wrong, I die. Like the tiger eats me kind of survival. So we don't always make the connection when we're experiencing this. But what happens when we move beyond survival, beyond achievement? It's just exploration. It's like, wow, this is possible. And right, so this was, oh wow, so March 23rd. A lot's gonna happen in the next couple months. I don't even know, but you know, this is fun. It doesn't have to be stressful, like, oh my gosh, like, I have so much to do, like, no, like, I can't do this, right? We're imagining possibilities and then we're seeing what shows up. Okay, so March 25th, and this says 2024, but I wrote it in 2023. I remember when I got the phone call from my quantum self. Oh, this is funny. I'm gonna share it because like you can have ideas about what's possible, and then later on decide like I don't know if I'm gonna do that. I was making potato fries, and I realized I was a comedic genius. I made $1 million by writing a comedic book with the characters based off my coworkers. I had just been in the bathroom laughing my head off at imagined scenarios with my coworkers. I was a natural at this. Uh, yeah, I mean, I find that kind of funny, but that's okay. Like, I don't think this has to be something that's super serious. Ooh, okay, this part's interesting. Yeah, so like talking about like being a comedic genius, like that idea of becoming a millionaire by writing comedic books was so far off my idea of what I thought I was going to do with my life that I didn't take it too seriously. And it became easy because my ego wasn't getting involved and making it difficult. So that's a really good point there. Okay, I wrote, I was absolutely amazed at how fabulously well this journal worked for me. Everything I wrote in it became true. Oh, wow. I had seen manifesting scripting techniques where you write out the same thing multiple times, but that's the epitome of boring, and I never did it. But it's like schoolwork. You really don't want to do, it's too much effort. Like Rhonda Byrne said, it has to be effortless, and journaling was effortless for me. Oh, and I have this sticker of It's the Little Prince. I don't think you're going to be able to see it very well, but... So, yeah, you can't, it's not showing up very well. There, we're back. Oh, this is interesting. So, this technique was so effective because the mind loves stories. It becomes incredibly engaged in all the stories that it even knows that aren't true. That it becomes really engaged in all the stories it knows that aren't true, that it knows aren't true. So it's easy for the mind to get lost in a fictional story of your life without raising objections. So it's like, you know, the mind can be like, oh, that's not true. Well, that's where creating and getting lost in this story of like what's possible, it can work for you to bypass those objections of what's possible. Okay, so I just have a little bit more. Ooh, these are cool. Like, it's so interesting to go back and see what you wrote. But I think I'll just do a little bit on... Yeah. So I was... Part of these thoughts, anxious thoughts that I was having, was worrying about being in a relationship with someone who hasn't done the work on themselves. And then I realized I could create whatever reality I wanted. And you could just, yeah, like there's so much freedom in that. And people create rules about what you need to do. But at the base level, there's that freedom. Yeah, so people have different manifestation techniques, but they kind of use whatever works for them, right? So you got to figure out what works for you. I discovered there was a magnitude of power in growing awareness of my emotion and thought patterns. gently redirecting them and letting them play with diffuse focus. I still had a clear intention, but I wasn't trying to create something artificially from the ego. Yeah, and like this awareness, like I was creating scenarios in my mind about things I didn't want to happen, but I think a lot of that is like purging this stuff. Like you think life has to be a certain way. Yeah, whenever you create these scenarios in your mind, like you're doing this to yourself in your own mind. I started to see my presence as inherently valuable and stop judging myself based on, how many hours I put into something or how many hours I worked on something. I saw my incredible essence and energy as something that energized and revitalized the energy of everyone around me, and I recognized my own value for that. Yeah, I started to focus on the image of a pure divine reverence and love directed towards me. Yeah, I grew that image within me of sharing that divine love and union with a masculine partner. I began to see clearly the contrast of a purely divine union and the desperate longing I felt within me before to avoid pain. Yeah, and I was talking about how this was a gift to be able to recognize like there's this process of purifying the deepest parts of myself. Okay, so I'm describing this incredible relationship. His reverence grew for me as my reverence of my own divine feminine grew. His love for me mirrored the love of myself. We explored the sacred depths of intimacy together, fully inhabiting and embodying our divine selves. I'm still experiencing this, like these anxious thoughts and anxious scenarios, creating these anxious scenarios within my mind, and then remembering, you know what, I can create whatever I want. So there is this aspect of just feeling like the energy and essence of what is being purged from you, and then releasing the story around it. As pain arose, it was seen, caressed, loved, accepted, transformed, and released. We lived and breathed our lives as an act of devotion to the sacred. We expanded and grew past limitations and conditioning, welcoming the challenge of discovering each false belief, newly arising and being made. And being made known in the conscious mind. Our journey was one of surrender, peace, joy, warmth, beauty, rest, and exhilaration. Yeah. As the divine nature was embraced more fully, life became more and more a sublime experience. More freedom, more ecstasy, more aliveness was felt. More opened up to be explored. All was given and provided for. It's really wonderful to create those kind of visions for ourselves, when we're in that kind of mood, which we can come back to reinvigorate that focus and that vision. I really love this, like finding it. It's almost been a year later, and discovering what has changed. Because here's the crazy thing is that, maybe not everything's gonna come true, but a lot of it can come true. I was watching a video about someone, she said there was a picture of two people surfing on the wall of the yoga studio. And she said, how many hours have I just looked at that picture absent-mindedly during yoga practice? And then she found a picture of herself with a friend surfing in her phone reel, in her camera reel on her phone. And she made the connection and realized, I never was interested in surfing, but I unconsciously recreated the same picture with my friend as what was in the yoga studio. So, like, it's it's crazy like that. And it doesn't make sense fully, like, to the mind, but like, that's why it's important to, you know, embrace those moments of hope and light and faith, because they will buoy you over to, like, the next like blossoming that's happening for you. So that's the end of what I wanted to share. And I didn't take too long this time. So I have, so about the stories, about what was going on, you know, like about the dark side of it. So we have like the divine side of where we're going, and then there's like the past and the dark side. So the next week's topic is the narcissistic family dynamic. So I have some other points to tie into that, like between this week and next week. And I think I will do that as I'll just post a video on Rumble. So I'm talking about the dark aspect and about these stories and explanations about what's really been going on here. So these are questions that came up for me that I wanted answers to, that I was like talking to my higher self about. So again, this is what's happened in the past. We're moving away from it into a beautiful, brighter future, so it might not be for everyone. I will post the link once I make that video in the description for this video. The key is, once you set your intentions, then let go and trust and surrender, having no attachment to outcomes. As soon as you set your intentions, the universe is conspiring in your favor. And as always, Paul has something just so on point to add to the discussion. Exactly. Yeah. Like, and we say, like, is it that simple? Like, yes, it is. It's that simple. It's, you know, and it's really about, we can make changes in our daily lives and our daily habits to create this as a habit. And yes, this is something that I can work on. And I finally found the journal. So I think the last journal entry was like last March. So I think I'll just continue writing a year in advance or behind, or however you want to think about that. And yeah, find that inspiration. I normally spend time with, like, using tarot to talk to, like, my higher self. And when I use it, it's just, it's this sense of connection and this peace, and, you know, like, this kind of connection that I really don't feel around other people right now. Like, here, I think here feels like a space where there's a lot of connection that's really beautiful, but that allows, like, you know, there's heaviness that shows up. So this allows me kind of like that sacred space of connection, and where I can focus on beauty and love. And what's been showing up just so consistently is new love and complete emotional fulfillment and happiness, just like this beautiful new, basically like paradigm or new reality. So, you know, great amazing things can happen to you regardless. But we can still lean into what we want to show up. I was supposed to be here on time with you tonight, but ran into a friend. I'm going to make a point of being on time next week. Awesome. Yeah, well, you know, it's great that you ran into a friend. That's awesome. I think I haven't been very good about, like, being on time, and I think this week I was on time. I also didn't spend too much time making too many slides either, but I reused some of that this week. Yeah, well, it's great that you joined, and great for you to show up here. And yeah, so much love for everyone here, everyone watching. And I hope there was something that you were inspired by. And yeah, continue investing time into being inspired, into what you really love to do. I got excited this week about doing a quilt. I bought these fabrics for a quilt a while ago. I wanted to do a quilt of like the scenery in Glencoe, Scotland, with the sky and then the mountains and then like a river running through, and then I want to have like the green mountain and then like these all fall colors of like heather, like the purple and heather and like the orange grasses. So it's almost like a mixed season kind of thing. But you know what? It's your artwork. You get to decide what happens there. And I just had the idea of maybe making like a slightly different color, or I mean it could even be done in the quilting, like the tree of life kind of going up. I mean, I'm excited thinking about it. Would be like a huge project, but allow yourself to be excited. Allow yourself to find joy and happiness in whatever you're doing in your life. And, you know, we see it. We see the energy that we want to be around, that we want to be, that we want in our lives. And we're moving closer and closer to it. So, yeah. Had some moments today. I was almost bringing out the tears there. But that's good. Okay, so I'm gonna say goodbye and see you next week. There we go.